Welcome to the Farmer Supply Association Agri Report. I'm Randy Kopechka, agronomist with Farmer Supply Association. We're taping this month on February the 15th. You know, it's about time to go to work. When I say that, I mean go to the field. I mean, most farmers are working year round, but it's really time to start getting to the field and doing some things out there as we get into, the last half of February and certainly into March. It's been a real wet February so far, so that's hampered getting anything done. I mean, there hadn't been much done. Anything that's been done has pretty much been done with an airplane. There's been a little bit this week. There was some wheat fertilized. I know we've moved some burn down. I'm not sure about applications of burn down, but I know we've moved some burn down, so probably been some burn down applied too. But other than that, really not much of anything going on in the field. We're just kind of looking for the right kind of weather. A lot of these things, we've got a little bit of time to get them done in. We just need to get that right weather window. Don't push things into bad conditions necessarily, since we do have some time to play with on some of this. Let's just look for those right weather windows. We need to get water off the fields. We've had a lot of rain. We need to get water off the fields. For wheat fertilizer, we don't like standing water on the field, obviously, to fertilize, and for applying burn down herbicides, those weeds have to be exposed, so we pretty much need water off the field in most cases for them. For fertilizer, we really want that ground at least firming up, preferably dry enough where it'll accept some water when it rains. That way you can get that fertilized down in the ground, but certainly at least firming up with water off the field before we think about fertilizer applications. We need active growth of our weeds for good herbicide activity. So again, in these situations where we're having a hard time getting things done, buy as much time as you can to get these conditions. And we may get to the point where you don't get these conditions and you got to make the best of a bad situation and just go ahead and do stuff. But if you got time to buy, we'll buy a little time to try to get these good conditions. A little bit more specifics about wheat fertilization, specifically our nitrogen fertilization of wheat. Again, we've got a little bit of time to get this done. Last year, we had another one of those years. We had a real cold spell and some winter precipitation that kind of kept us from doing things. And I know a lot of cases it was the 1st of March before I was talking to one of the pilots yesterday, or texting back and forth, and he said, my first flight last year was like the afternoon, 3:30 in the afternoon on March 1st. So we're not at at the end yet for sure. So we've got some time to get these things done, and just hope we can get them done pretty quick. Again, try to get these good conditions. In wheat fertilizer, we want to get most of that fertilizer out by the time the joint starts moving, internodal elongation, the reproductive stage gets going. So keep that in mind. Normally that's probably 10th, 15th of March, somewhere in there, depending on the year. I've seen it happen in February. I've seen it happen more like the 20th of March. But we want to get most of that fertilizer out there by joint movement time, because that's where we get that yield potential built right there. So we don't want to get too late. As far as rates, the university recommendation is generally 120 units for our sandy and silt loam soils. I know some people push that to 130, maybe 140. I've even, saw some 150s last year. So, if on your farm, that you get specific rates to respond, well then, keep that in mind. But again, the base rate's 120, but often we can push it a little more than that if we think we've got that potential and we've got responses from those kind of rates before. As far as, we definitely like to split applications. I know back in the day when I first started in extension, back in the 80s, a lot of guys would just go one application with their wheat fertilizing, and, really like to see multiple applications out there, 2 or 3. I've done it both ways. I've done 2, I've done 3. My only issue with maybe applying 3 is sometimes if you're applying 3, that third one may be later than I'd like to see. Again, I said you'd like to get most of that fertilizer out by joining. It's hard enough to get 1 timed, but try to get 3 timed in decent conditions is even tougher. So, if you're making 3 applications, again, that's probably good in most cases, especially on real sandy soils or real wet soils. But we don't want that third one to be so late, that it's really maybe not helping our yield very much at all. It can help prevent deficiencies late in the season. That's obviously good. But as far as affecting that yield potential in a positive way, if you get too late, I don't think it does very much. So again, that's the only drawback I see with 3. If you're using 3, don't be too late with that third one. Like I said, I've gone both ways, been successful both ways, and just whatever works best for you. The wetter it is, the warmer it is, and we're seeing some of those conditions. Like today, it's 72 degrees outside, and it's very wet out there. So in these conditions, Agritain is certainly, I think, will pay off with your urea. Agritain is not as critical as it is with rice when it's really warm and can be wet that time of year, but certainly I would look at Agritain. The warmer it is, the wetter it is. On our sandy soils, you got to put sulfur out there, and to me, you got to put it more than once. I know the university recommendation is 120 unit shot, but on some of these sands we have around here, especially in the north part of Jackson County, Tuckerman, Swifton area up there, well, I really think you need to have at least 2 sulfur applications, normally, and getting probably at least 20 to 30 units total out there to really prevent those sulfur deficiencies. So that's wheat fertilization. The other thing that's going to be going on, I don't know if any, like I said, there may have been a little bit going on so far, but it's really going to pick up here in the next few weeks, is burn down herbicide applications. Most people are doing some type of burn down anymore. It could be different methods or different situations. Why do people use burn downs? Well, really 2 main reasons. One, if you've got your ground ready and you're either going to no-till or stale seed bed, that'll help keep it clean till planting. And another situation that we often see, and especially in a wet year like this, is that we're going to work the ground anyway, but we don't want that ground to get overgrown with weeds or too much stuff out there, because it'll do 2 things. It'll keep the soil from drying out. It'll keep the soil cold. So in those situations, oftentimes we'll just put a shot of Roundup out there just to kind of keep things held back. Maybe not get total control of everything, but at least keep things held back where the sunshine can hit the ground, we can dry out a little quicker, and we can warm up a little quicker. So, that's the 2 situations where we recommend burn down, or people use burn downs, I should say. Generally, there can be 2 base situations with our burn downs. One is a Roundup base, the other is a gramoxone base. And there's other things we can use as well, but that's kind of the 2 major ways we go about it. My rule of thumb on Roundup is before the pigweeds start emerging. That's when I like Roundup to be my base herbicide. After pigweeds start emerging, and we have certainly pigweed infestations in fields, and we got to switch to something like gramoxone, because Roundup won't touch the pigweeds, and gramoxone is one of the best things for pigweeds. So that's kind of my breaking point right there as a general rule of thumb. Generally, if people are using Roundup, we're going to, unless it's one of those situations where we're just trying to keep things managed a little bit. Otherwise, I want to mix something with the Roundup, like a 2,4-D, a first shot, or a Sharpen. All 3 of those can be very effective as a tank mix with Roundup and help get better control, increase our spectrum, get more, maybe some resistant weeds to Roundup, take care of those as well. So we want to mix something with the Roundup. Gramoxone, generally we want to mix, if we can, a PS2 inhibitor herbicide with the gramoxone. That includes metribuzin if we're going to soybeans, atrazine or metribuzin if we're going to corn or grain sorghum, diuron if we're going to cotton, and also Command if we're going to rice. So that's that Command is not a PS2. Let me draw back. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself right there. But metribuzin if we're going to be planting into soybeans, atrazine or metribuzin if we're going to corn or grain sorghum, and diuron for cotton. So you can mix those PS2s with your gramoxone. Gramoxone is a great contact killer, but it doesn't work its way into the plant too much. So that's why we add these PS2s if we can to help get that gramoxone in the plant and get better control. Now back to the Command and the rice. Again, for rice, there is no PS2 that we can use in with the gramoxone, because there would be a plant back situation right there. So if we're going to plant rice, there's not a PS2 we can use, but if it's going to be beans, also corn, grain, sorghum, cotton, then we can mix that PS2 out there and get better control. Ryegrass is a specific situation we're seeing more and more of. I know I was driving down from Jonesboro earlier today and saw some pretty good ryegrass taking off in fields, so we got to be concerned about that. In my opinion, we need to be thinking about using pre's back in the fall, like in late October to the very first part of November. Get a pre out there, and that'll help keep that ryegrass from coming up and having to deal with these situations right now when it's tougher to control. So for those pre's, something like a dual, Zidua, or Anthem Flex in front of soybeans, corn, or grain sorghum. Boundary in front of beans can be used. And here's where I was catching up ahead of myself a while ago. Command in rice situations where rice is going to be grown the following year, we can use Command for ryegrass control. So that's where I was trying to go a while ago and got ahead of myself. But again, Command got labeled a year or two ago, and it can be used in front of rice to keep this ryegrass from coming up. So those are the pre's we can use for ryegrass. Once it comes up and we're this time of year, we got two choices. We got clethodim, which is the active ingredient in Select. We have generics like Section 3 that we sell. These can be used before that ryegrass starts joining, and generally you can get some pretty good control. Once that ryegrass gets bigger, we're looking at something like a gramoxone, and preferably one of those PS2 herbicides if we can use those, depending on the situation. That's for the bigger ryegrass, and often we won't get total control, but oftentimes we can give maybe 2 shots and get it burned down to a manageable state right there. So again, Section 3, clethodim, Select before joint movement, and then gramoxone, preferably plus a PS2 after joining of the ryegrass. So, and when we're making these burn down applications, often we'll want to try to get a residual out there to keep it clean between then and planting. Our general rule of thumb right there, our go-to herbicide is generally Valor. Of course, we've got to keep our plant back in mind right there. We're fine with soybeans, but again, if we're going to like a rice or a corn or a grain sorghum, then we've got to plant back with that Valor of 30 days. So we've got to keep that in mind. And in certain situations, if we're getting too late, we won't be able to use a residual with it like that. So again, keep in mind your plant backs. They're all listed in the MP44 for all of these burn down herbicides and these additives that have soil activity. So it's kind of where we're at right now. Needing to dry out and get some things done. And, it won't be long. It'll be time to stick some seed in the ground, and hopefully by the next time I talk to you, we'll be in a lot better situation and be able to get close to get some stuff in the ground. Until next time, this has been Randy Kopechka with your Farmers Supply Association report for February.